He thought his betrayal would destroy me. He thought I'd cry, beg, and disappear. But instead, I turned his business, our business, into my revenge weapon. My name is Kala. And the night I stood outside that gleaming office building, keys in my hand, I felt the weight of a story only I could tell. That building once belonged to him. He built it on lies and arrogance. But tonight it belonged to me. He cheated. But instead of falling apart, I picked up every broken piece and built something unstoppable. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in fragments like shards of glass cutting me one by one. A buzzing phone left unlocked on the nightstand. A message flashing across the screen. Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again. His voice on the phone, low and secretive, slipping out the door with a smile he no longer shared with me. And then the dinners. The late nights he swore were for business. Except I saw them. The candlelight, the way he leaned in too close, the laughter he once reserved for me. For a moment, I thought I would drown. That kind of betrayal rips through you, takes your breath, leaves you gasping. But something inside me shifted. Where most people would have broken, I sharpened. I turned every sleepless night, every tear into a plan. While he was busy betraying me, I was watching him, studying him, not just as a man, but as a businessman. Every lie he told me became fuel. Every secret became leverage. And the empire he thought he ruled alone? I had already begun to map out its cracks. Flashes still haunt me, but they also thrill me. My hand signing contracts with a steady pen. Office lights buzzing awake under new management, my management. His face when he realized what I had done. Eyes wide, pale, his confidence shattered in an instant. Most people, when cheated on, drown in heartbreak. But I didn't. I plotted. I calculated. I rebuilt. And in the end, I left him with nothing. But how do you take the man who broke your heart and break his empire instead? That's what you're about to find out. So let me ask you, what would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you like this? Would you cry, collapse, or would you come back swinging? If betrayal and payback stories grip you, hit that subscribe button and join us here at Payback Stories. Because this one will leave your jaw on the floor. Let's start at the very beginning. The love, the trust, and the foundation we built together. Before he destroyed it. My name is Kala, and before everything fell apart, before betrayal carved a hole in my chest, I was just a woman in love with a dreamer. We met when we had nothing. No money, no safety net, not even a plan beyond blind ambition. But what we did have was each other. And in those early days, that felt like enough. Two people against the world, armed with nothing but sleepless nights and the stubborn belief that together, we could build something worth remembering. He had this way of making every possibility sound certain. His voice carried conviction. His eyes sparkled with ideas too big to ignore. And when he looked at me, I felt like I was part of something extraordinary. He promised forever. Forever in love, forever in business, forever in life. And I believed him. Oh, how I believed him. We built everything side by side. Nights blurred into mornings as we sketched out plans in the margins of notebooks, fueled by cheap coffee and determination. We ate our dinners off takeout boxes under buzzing office lights. We celebrated small victories, like paying rent on time, as though they were major milestones. Every sacrifice felt worth it, because it was us. We weren't just chasing a dream, we were building one together. It all began with a single cafe. A tiny place, barely big enough to hold our hopes. I handled the details, the money, the hiring, the schedules, the endless lists no one saw. He handled the charm. Customers loved him. Investors were drawn in by his charisma. But the truth? The numbers that kept us alive, the systems that made it all run, the hands that held it together when it wanted to fall apart, those were mine, and I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for applause. His wins were mine. His vision was mine. We were a team, and that was enough for me. The cafe took off. Word spread. People came not just for coffee, but for the energy, the sense of something new. Soon, expansion was on the table. One location became 2, then 3. Investors started circling, intrigued by what they thought he had built. He dazzled them with his speeches, his smile, his promises of growth. And behind every presentation, I was there, crunching numbers, writing plans, making sure his promises could actually be delivered. I wasn't just his girlfriend, I was the backbone of the company. I trained the staff, wrote the manuals, designed the marketing that pulled people through the doors. When bills piled up, I found a way to pay them. When things broke, I figured out how to fix them. He stood in the spotlight, but I kept the lights on, and for years, I told myself it didn't matter who got credit. We were in this together. His shine was our shine. His success was ours. But cracks don't stay hidden forever. They started small. He grew distant. The man who used to laugh with me over broken espresso machines now came home silent, distracted. His phone, once forgotten on the counter, never left his side. He guarded it like it held the secrets of the universe. Friends started whispering, cautious, hesitant. Calla, have you noticed? He's different. He disappears. He seems elsewhere. I waved them off. Not him, not us. We're stronger than that. I said it with conviction, but inside, a shadow of doubt had already taken root, and then the red flags grew louder. Money missing from accounts with no explanation. Receipts that didn't add up. Payments delayed. When I asked him, he brushed me aside with smooth words. Business expenses. Don't worry about it. Always the same line, always the same dismissive tone. But worry grew in me anyway. Because I could see the inconsistencies, the cracks he thought I wouldn't notice. And then came the late nights. The meetings. The sudden sharp clothes. The cologne he never wore for me anymore. He'd tell me he was seeing investors, that it was business, but the hours never matched the story. Still, I held on. Still, I told myself it was stress, that building an empire changes people, that he couldn't possibly betray me, not him, not us, but the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. No matter how much you try to bury it, the night it all unraveled is seared into my memory. I wasn't looking for him. I wasn't suspicious. I was simply out, grabbing dinner at a restaurant we used to celebrate in when we were nobodies with big dreams. And there he was, tucked into a corner booth, a glass of wine in his hand, leaning close across the table. His smile, the one I thought belonged only to me, was shining on her. Their laughter was soft, intimate, the kind that carries its own language. Her hand brushed his and he didn't move away. In that instant, the air left my lungs. The chatter around me dulled to nothing. Glasses clinked, music played, people laughed, but it was all background noise to the sight in front of me. Him, her, and the truth I could no longer deny. I stood frozen, torn between rage and heartbreak, between wanting to scream and wanting to collapse. Everything I thought we had built together crumbled in that single glance across the room. But here's the thing about betrayal. It never comes alone. What I saw that night was only the surface. The real shock was still waiting for me, and it was far worse than I could ever have imagined. I confronted him the very next night. My hands were shaking, my chest tight, but I needed the truth spoken aloud. I asked him about the woman, the dinner, the way he smiled at her, the way he used to smile at me. And just like that, his mask slipped into something colder than I had ever seen before. He didn't apologize. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he leaned back, arms crossed, and spat words that cut deeper than the betrayal itself. You're paranoid, Calla. You're imagining things. And honestly, you should be grateful for me. Everything you have, everything you are, it's because of me. Without me, you'd be nothing. Nothing. That word echoed in my ears long after he stormed out of the room. I wasn't just betrayed. I was erased. It was in that moment that I understood. He didn't just cheat on me in love. He cheated in business too. For years, I had carried the weight of our company, running payroll, balancing budgets, training staff, creating systems, and marketing campaigns that kept customers pouring in. Yet to the outside world, I was invisible. Investors looked at him like he was a visionary, the man who built it all. And me? I was the supportive girlfriend, the one who clapped in the background while he took credit for the work I had bled for. That realization burned hotter than the affair itself. It wasn't just my heart he betrayed, it was my legacy. And so I stopped crying. I stopped arguing. I started watching, listening, gathering. I played the role he wanted me to play, quiet, compliant, fragile. But behind closed doors, I was a woman on a mission. Night after night, I pored over contracts, bank statements, emails. I memorized every number, traced every dollar, followed every shadow he thought I'd never see, and the more I uncovered, the clearer his plan became. He was setting me up to be pushed out, legally. Hidden clauses buried in contracts. Deals signed behind my back. Shares quietly diluted, giving him majority control. It wasn't sloppy, it was calculated. Then came the knife twist. The woman he was with? She wasn't just a fling. She wasn't even about love. She was the daughter of a wealthy investor, a pawn in his game. While I thought he was sneaking around for passion, he was plotting a power move. Replace me emotionally, yes, but more importantly, replace me professionally. I could see it all now. He planned to erase me from the company I had built with my bare hands, while securing a financial future tied neatly to her family's wealth. His betrayal wasn't random, it was strategic. The rage inside me should have broken me. But instead, it crystallized into something sharper, something stronger. He thought I would collapse. He thought I would walk away in humiliation, shattered, powerless. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't even begin to understand, was that my silence wasn't weakness. I was gathering proof. I was piecing together every lie, every theft, every hidden deal. And with each discovery, my revenge began to take shape. He thought I was weak. He thought he could erase me. But he underestimated the one thing he could never control, my mind. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Thin envelope, embossed logo, lawyer's letterhead, everything cold and official. My name was on it, but not in the way I had earned it. It was a dismissal, a notice, a carefully worded cut that said, plainly and legally, he was removing me from the company I had bled to build. My hands went numb as I read the words. For a second, I let the room tilt around me. Then something else happened. An old rhythm that had kept me awake for years kicked in. Memory. Every midnight spreadsheet, every training session where I had been the only calm voice, every missed birthday because of a product launch, every penny I'd tracked, every vendor I'd begged to give us more time. They put my life into ink and told me it meant nothing. Heartbreak arrived first, an animal, hot and immediate. But it did not last. Rage followed, clean and bright like a bell. You could say it should have broken me. It didn't. Instead, it clarified everything. Standing there with his lawyer's words burning my eyes, I tasted not just loss, but a plan forming. If he wanted me gone, then fine. I would go on my terms. And when I left, I wouldn't leave empty-handed. I would take the ground right out from under his feet. I remembered everything then, with surgical detail. The nights I patched payroll with my own savings. The weekends I spent fixing a failing location while he was off networking. The time I stayed up coding a scheduling system because the third-party solution was too expensive. Every risk I'd suggested that he later took credit for in meetings. Every time a journalist asked who was behind the brand, his name came first, and mine was footnoted as a support act. All of it, erased in a single legal paragraph. Most people think betrayal is just a private ache. They don't see how fast it can become a financial weapon. They don't see how someone can weaponize paperwork, signatures, and boardrooms. He was doing both to me, privately replacing me with a lie, publicly replacing me with a narrative that erased my work. He assumed that a legal letter could silence history. He assumed he could buy loyalty and bury truth. He was wrong. I didn't answer his calls. I didn't stage a scene. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer like it was evidence. Quietly, I began to move. Revenge, I decided, would not be loud. It would be meticulous. It would be boring to watch until it wasn't. It would be the slow, precise disassembly of a man who believed paperwork was all-powerful. I started where the foundation was still weak: people. I reached out to the managers who had worked shoulder to shoulder with me. I met baristas who remembered the first night we opened, cooks who knew I'd stayed to smooth the kinks, an HR lead who had leaned on me when we didn't have the budget for temp help. They were surprised to hear from me. Some were guarded. Others, when I spoke plainly, let down their shields. "We always knew," one of them said. "You were the backbone." Small truths. But truths matter. I listened more than I spoke. People told me things in fragments at first. Complaints about unpaid overtime. Whispers about invoices that never made it to the accounting department. A vendor who hadn't been paid in months and was suddenly seeing an account move to a shell company. Names tumbled out. Middle managers who'd been sidelined. A CFO who had been encouraged to look the other way. Staff who'd been promised raises that never appeared. The company he'd built on charm was patchwork beneath the polish. One of the managers slid me a folder the size of a paperback book, hushed and hesitant. Inside were copies of internal memos, expense reports, and emails that didn't match the public story. Line items labeled consulting that, when traced, redirected to accounts I'd never seen. Reimbursements for business dinners that included names that were not investors but friends. Tiny discrepancies, alone meaningless. Together they spelled a habit, a pattern of using corporate accounts as a slush fund, burying liabilities in subsidiaries, and creating appearances for investors, while the actual books were rotting. The more I dug, the clearer the truth. His empire was a mirage. It looked solid because he'd learned how to make it look solid. He'd learned how to sweet-talk facilities managers, how to charm a banker for a bridge loan, how to present projections that dazzled. But behind his smile was a ledger of promises unkept. Employees owed money. Suppliers owed answers. Investors were quiet in public, but asking pointed questions in private. And then there were the personal betrayals, which were worse because they were practical. The woman at the dinners wasn't an accident or a distraction. She was a strategic insertion. Her father sat on a board I'd never met, a silent figure with deep pockets and a taste for publicity. Their relationship had not been born from romance alone. It had been cultivated as leverage. Where I had built systems, trained staff, and signed leases, he had been planting social seeds, relationships that would allow him to sideline me without disturbing the cash flow. He had not simply traded me for someone else's affection. He had traded me for security. He'd misread loyalty for love and thought he could buy both. He planned to replace my name in the legal documents with another signature and the company with a new face, while the old foundation continued to crumble out of sight. It was odious and efficient. I felt the old anger morph into something colder. I began to map my response the way I had once mapped expansion plans, step by step, contingency by contingency. If he thought a lawyer's letter erased me, I would show him the power of the truth and the people who'd seen it happen. If he thought his investors were bulletproof, I would remind them that numbers have to add up. If he thought the woman at his side could sustain his empire, I would show him how fragile her loyalty was to money. There was a sharp, private moment where I sat alone and laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh that tasted like victory already hinted at. Because betrayal had given me clarity. It had turned my grief into strategy and exposed the seams of his little kingdom. He built a castle of lies. And I was about to blow it wide open. I decided early on I wouldn't make a scene. Revenge didn't need fireworks or fury. It needed a plan. Calm, cruelly efficient, and utterly unavoidable. If he wanted to erase me with a lawyer's pen, I'd answer him with something far harder to litigate. Success built on truth, on people, on a brand that couldn't be stolen back with a signature. Step 1 was invisible at first. I launched a new company, small and quiet, under a name that meant nothing to him. No press release, no selfies on social media, just a shell of paperwork and a handful of my closest allies who knew how to keep a secret. I registered the domain, rented a tiny office that nobody noticed, and spent nights sketching a concept that borrowed everything that worked about our old venture and stripped away the rot. It was the same idea we had once dreamed together, but cleaner, fairer, and unmistakably mine. I didn't advertise with billboards. I advertised with action. I redesigned menus for clarity, hired a staffing model that actually paid living wages, and built a training manual that didn't treat employees like expendable parts. I put processes in place that I'd written in desperate, exhausted nights, inventory tracking that didn't allow skimming, payroll systems that couldn't be redirected, customer databases that belonged to the company and not a hidden pocket of his. Small changes, but ironclad. Step 2 was the human step. I started quietly courting his best people, not with promises of revenge, but with promises of something he had never offered: respect and fairness. I reached out to baristas who had become managers, to the head baker who worked through sleep-deprived nights, to the HR lead who'd been complicit out of fear. I met them for coffee, listened to their grievances, and told them, plainly, that I wanted to build a place where their work mattered and their pay matched it. They were skeptical, of course. People who have been burned twice learn to guard their trust. But I didn't ask for blind loyalty. I showed them contracts, the kind that honored overtime, benefits, and clear promotion paths. I gave them control over parts of the business they'd only ever been told about. It wasn't charity, it was practical. I needed them, and they needed a leader with skin in the game. Slowly they came. Not all at once, but in a steady trickle that surprised him later when the staff roster started to thin on his side and swell on mine. Step 3 was the most dangerous and the most necessary: the investors. He had built his facade on a circle of moneyed people who liked the idea of being part of something flashy. He liked their applause more than he liked the work. I arranged private meetings one by one, lunches with envelopes of evidence, quiet presentations in cafes that didn't scream drama. I met them where they were comfortable and showed them documents they hadn't been given, internal expense reports, vendor statements, emails that linked consulting fees to shadow accounts. I handed them payroll records that proved unpaid overtime and invoices redirected to shells. I presented everything calmly, like a woman reading numbers at a meeting. I didn't shout accusations. I laid down receipts. Every lie he'd told, every idea he'd claimed as his alone, every off-book transfer, there it was in black and white. Some of these investors were furious. Some were embarrassed. A few were quietly relieved to be shown the truth before they lost more money. The point wasn't to humiliate them, it was to remove his armor. If they stopped funding him, the whole little house of cards would start to wobble. Simultaneously, I reimagined the core concept and made it better. I took the bones of what he'd once sold, cozy cafes, community vibe, reliable product, and sharpened them. Where his model skimmed margins with cheap labor and phantom vendors, mine invested in quality, better beans, transparent sourcing, clear nutrition labeling, loyalty programs that rewarded actual customers instead of ghost accounts. I rebranded with a name that felt honest and human, and built a brand voice that spoke to values, not buzzwords. Customers noticed. The difference wasn't immediate, but it was clear. Word spread through neighborhoods. This new place actually cared about its workers. The pastries tasted fresher. The staff remembered your order. Social posts picked up momentum not because of glitzy marketing, but because of genuine customer stories. A morning barista who remembered your kid's name. A manager who noticed your dietary restriction and fixed it without making you feel awkward. Those little things are everything in hospitality. They converted casual buyers into loyal regulars. Investors noticed too. Those I'd met privately started asking for public metrics. They compared my growth rate to his and asked questions that made him uncomfortable in boardrooms where he'd once spoken confidently. Rumors began to circulate. Why were his top managers leaving? Why were suppliers sending invoices with different payees? Why did one of his flagship locations have a sudden maintenance backlog? I never attacked him directly in public. I didn't need to. I peeled away what held him up, his staff, his customers, his credibility, and I replaced it with something sturdier. My growth was boringly good. Steady increases in foot traffic, loyal repeat customers, clean ledgers. Where he had charisma, I had competence. Where he had smoke and mirrors, I had receipts and relations. It's important to understand something. Revenge can be loud, or it can be precise. I chose precise. I watched as the cracks I'd identified earlier widened under the weight of genuine operations. I watched investors start to ask for audits. I watched vendors demand payment. I watched his nights grow longer, not because he was meeting investors, but because he was scrambling to cover holes he'd hidden for months. There were moments of small, satisfying theater. I'd run into him at supply drop-offs, his face tight as one of my new managers signed a delivery invoice. I'd see him at industry mixers, plastering a smile on while somebody whispered about unpaid rent at a satellite store. I never gloated. I let the work speak. I let the truth do the heavy lifting, because in the end, I realized something he never would. You don't have to destroy someone with fury to end them. You can do it with the dignity of building something better. You can take what was yours, what you poured your life into, and make it what it should have been all along. You can show the world what honest work looks like, and let the rest fall apart from its own rot. But revenge isn't just about taking back what's yours. It's about leaving them with nothing to stand on. And soon, that's exactly what happened. His empire didn't crumble in a single day. It cracked, splintered, and then finally shattered. The walkouts came first. Baristas, cooks, and shift managers who had once kept his business running finally had enough. They left mid-shift, aprons tossed onto counters, register drawers left open for all to see. Customers stood stunned, watching the slow unraveling. Photos leaked online, half-empty cafes, angry Yelp reviews, whispers of unpaid wages. Then came the lawsuits. Vendors sued for breach of contract. Employees sued for stolen overtime. One brave investor filed for fraud. Suddenly, the shiny empire he flaunted in every pitch deck was a paper house in a storm, and the investors, the ones he thought he owned with his charisma, they were the first to vanish. Meetings canceled. Funding withdrawn. The handshakes that had once kept him invincible dissolved overnight. They had seen my documents, my proof, and they knew. He wasn't just a bad partner. He was a liability. The day he showed up at my office, the storm had already swallowed him whole. He came unannounced, wild-eyed, suit wrinkled like he hadn't slept in days. My receptionist tried to stop him, but he barged in anyway, slamming the glass door so hard it rattled. His voice cracked the air. "Calla, what the hell did you do? How could you? After everything I gave you, how could you turn on me like this?" I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my voice. I looked at him the way you'd look at a stranger lost in the wrong building. And then I said the only truth he could never spin into a lie. "You betrayed me. You betrayed everyone. I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourself." Silence filled the room after that, heavy and undeniable. He wanted to scream, to argue, to twist the story the way he always had. But the evidence was already everywhere. The lawsuits. The walkouts. The vanished investors. There was nothing left for him to manipulate. And then came the final knife. His new woman. The one he'd thought was his golden ticket. The investor's daughter. She walked out too. She didn't slam a door or make a scene. She just stopped showing up. When the money dried up, so did her interest. He was left exactly where he had started. Alone, except now his name was mud and his reputation a punchline. He tried to rebuild. I'll give him that. He scraped at the edges, pitched smaller investors, promised comebacks. But it didn't matter where he went. The whispers followed. People remembered. In boardrooms, in coffee shops, at networking mixers, his name was a cautionary tale. The man who cheated his partner and bled his own company dry. Nobody wanted to touch him. Nobody wanted to be seen beside him. Meanwhile, my business didn't just survive, it thrived. With every investor meeting, I walked in with clean books and staff who actually praised their workplace. Customers kept returning, bringing friends, leaving glowing reviews. One location became 3. 3 became 10. Expansion faster, stronger, more sustainable than his ever was. Where his empire had been built on lies, mine was built on proof. And everyone could see the difference. The final showdown wasn't a confrontation. It was a ghost sighting. I was stepping out of my new headquarters, a gleaming glass building with my name etched proudly on the sign above the doors. Staff buzzed inside, customers lined up at the cafe downstairs. Investors toured floors that hummed with energy, and there he was, standing on the sidewalk, staring up at my building with the hollow eyes of a man who couldn't believe the future he'd once tried to erase now towered above him. For a moment, I almost felt something. Pity, maybe. But then I remembered the lawyer's letter, the smirk when he told me I was nothing, the way he planned to erase me as though I had never existed. I walked right past him, didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't even acknowledge him. To me, he wasn't a rival or a villain, or even a memory worth speaking of. He was simply nothing, and just like that, the man who once thought he owned my future became just a shadow in my past. Revenge was never really about watching him fall apart. That was just the side effect. What mattered, the only thing that truly mattered, was taking back the power he thought he had stolen from me. Every brick of my new company, every glowing review, every paycheck that went out to an employee who finally felt valued, it wasn't just business. It was survival. It was resilience. It was victory written in numbers, in smiles, in the steady hum of a brand built on honesty instead of lies. People who once whispered doubts now looked at me with awe. Friends who had said, maybe you should just move on, now told me they'd never seen anyone rise the way I did. And my staff, oh, my staff. They thrived. They weren't afraid to speak up anymore. They trusted me, because I had always been there for them, even when I was in the shadows of his spotlight. Customers trusted us too. They could feel the difference. They weren't just walking into a cafe, they were stepping into a place that had survived betrayal, rebuilt from ashes, and come out stronger. You could see it in their loyalty, in the way they'd bring friends, in the way our name began to spread far beyond the city. And here's the part I never expected. I don't hate him anymore. Not even a little. Hatred takes energy, and he isn't worth a single spark of mine. He's irrelevant. His name doesn't burn, it doesn't sting, it just doesn't matter. The pain that once hollowed me out has been replaced by something far more powerful. Pride. Pride in what I built, Pride in who I became. Pride in the fact that I didn't just win against him. I won against the weaker version of myself. The one who thought she couldn't breathe without him. The one who believed his lies. The one who almost let herself be erased. I outgrew her. I outgrew him. And I stepped into something bigger than either of us could have imagined. Because in the end, this wasn't just about him losing. It was about me winning, on my own terms, in my own name. But what do we take from this? What lesson does this story leave us with? Betrayal has two paths. It can break you into pieces so small you can't recognize yourself anymore. Or it can forge you into something stronger than you ever imagined. I know because I lived both sides of it. See, people think revenge is about destruction, about fire, chaos, payback in the loudest, ugliest ways. But sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't about tearing someone else down. It's about building yourself up so high, they can't even touch you anymore. Revenge can look like reinvention. It can look like walking into the office they thought they'd stolen from you, holding the keys, and smiling because you don't need their approval to succeed. It can look like turning every scar into a blueprint, every broken promise into fuel for something unstoppable. When someone underestimates you, don't argue. Don't beg them to see your worth. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're weak. And then, use that doubt like gasoline. That's what I did. And trust me, the fire it creates can light up an empire. Cheating hurts the heart in ways that feel unbearable. But betrayal in business? That can fuel you in ways you never thought possible. Because heartbreak fades, but the hunger to prove yourself, to show the world you don't need them, that hunger can build something bigger than any partnership ever could. So let me ask you this. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever been cut down by someone you trusted, are you going to stay broken? Or are you going to rebuild stronger? Because the truth is, the real victory wasn't leaving him with nothing. That was just the echo. The real victory was proving, to him, to the world, and most of all to myself, that I never needed him to become everything I am now. He cheated, but I revamped his business. He lied, but I told the truth. He thought he ended me, but really, he started me. And that, my friends, is the sweetest payback of all.